A calm, elegant black woman arrives at a luxury wedding, holding a discreet invitation, just trying to quietly attend. The bride smirks, blocks her path, and loudly declares, "This is a private event. No plus ones, especially uninvited ones like you." What no one knows. The woman she just humiliated is the billionaire CEO of the company where the groom works, and his direct boss. By the time the vows are over, the bride will be speechless, the guests stunned, and her husband's career frozen in one shocking twist. Before we find out what happens next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story already has your jaw dropping, hit that like button. The sun hung high and generous over the manicured lawns of the Oakhaven Country Club. It was a perfect day for a wedding, the kind of day that money could arrange but never truly guarantee. Light bounced off the crystal champagne flutes being carried by white-gloved waiters. Photographers, like patient hunters, moved through the arriving guests, their lenses capturing smiles that were as bright and expensive as the jewelry on display. At the center of this perfect picture stood Haley Prescott, the bride, a vision in a designer gown that seemed to be spun from light itself. She was glowing, not with love, but with the fierce, triumphant pride of a woman who had orchestrated every last detail of her own coronation. The wedding was not just a ceremony. It was a statement. It was a declaration of her family's status, her new husband's potential, and most importantly, her own flawless taste. The guest list had been curated with the precision of a museum curator, each name a testament to wealth, influence, or both. There was no room for error. There was no room for anyone who did not belong. Through this polished scene of calculated perfection, Dr. Vanessa Cole moved with a quiet, unassuming grace. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the flamboyant pastels and shimmering fabrics worn by the other women. It was a dress chosen for its comfort and subtlety, the choice of a woman who had no need to announce her presence. In her hand, she held a small, embossed invitation, the cardstock thick and expensive. She had parked her own car, a modest sedan, in the guest lot, waving off the valets who rushed to her door. She preferred to walk, to feel the gravel crunch under her heels, to observe the world without a filter of attendants and drivers. She smiled politely at the security guard stationed near the grand, flower-draped entrance. He nodded back, his eyes briefly scanning her simple attire before moving on, already dismissing her as unimportant. Vanessa was used to it. In a world that screamed for attention, her quiet power was often mistaken for weakness. She was just about to present her invitation to the young man at the welcome table when a voice cut through the gentle murmur of the crowd. "Excuse me, can I help you?" The voice was high, sharp, and coated in a cloying sweetness that failed to mask its steel edge. It was Haley. The bride had moved from her position at the center of attention to stand directly in Vanessa's path. She raised a perfectly manicured hand, a gesture that was both a greeting and a barrier. "Sorry," Haley said, her voice now loud enough for the guests nearby to turn and watch. "This is a private, invite-only event." Her eyes swept over Vanessa's simple dress, her lack of ostentatious jewelry, and a small, satisfied smirk played on her lips. This was a moment she savored, the chance to enforce the exclusivity she had so carefully crafted. Vanessa's polite smile never wavered. She held up her invitation. "I believe this is the right place. I'm here for Evan Prescott's wedding." She spoke calmly, her voice a low counterpoint to Haley's shrill announcement. She assumed it was a simple mistake, a miscommunication that could be cleared up in a moment. But Haley didn't even glance at the invitation. She was performing for the small audience that had gathered, her friends and family who understood and shared her values. "I said no plus ones," Haley declared, her voice rising with theatrical authority. "We simply can't have strangers crashing our special day. It's a matter of security, you see." A few of the guests chuckled, a soft, cruel sound that rippled through the air. They saw what Haley wanted them to see, A social climber, a party crasher, someone who had wandered in from the service entrance, hoping for a free glass of champagne. Vanessa felt the stares, the quick, dismissive judgments. She had faced boardrooms filled with hostile executives, negotiated billion-dollar deals with sharks, and stared down prejudice her entire life. This was nothing, yet it was still wearying. "My name is on the guest list," Vanessa said, her patience still intact, though a quiet firmness now underscored her tone. "If you would just check again. Dr. Vanessa Cole." She enunciated the name clearly. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something, uncertainty perhaps, crossed Haley's face. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. It didn't matter. She had already committed to this public drama, and her pride would not allow her to back down now. She let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, please," she sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "I know all of Evan's important contacts. He doesn't know anyone like you." The final two words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Like you. The meaning was clear, a coded insult that everyone understood. It wasn't about the dress or the invitation. It was about who Vanessa was. Or rather, who Haley perceived her to be. The air grew still. The polite smiles on the faces of the nearby guests froze. The security guard, sensing the escalating tension, took a half-step forward, his hand resting near his side. Haley, feeling empowered by the guard's movement and the silent support of her audience, delivered her final, crushing command. She gestured vaguely toward the side of the building where the kitchen staff were taking a brief break in the shade. "Why don't you go wait outside with the catering staff?" she said, her voice filled with smug finality. "Someone will bring you a plate if there are leftovers." She then turned her back, dismissing Vanessa as completely as one might dismiss a fly, and walked back toward the warmth and light of her perfect wedding. From a discreet distance, partially hidden by a large potted ficus tree, Lena Brooks watched the entire exchange, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. Lena was more than Vanessa's personal assistant. She was her friend, her protector, the one person who knew the full story of the woman who had climbed from janitor to CEO. Her blood was boiling. The raw, undisguised arrogance of the bride was infuriating. But it was Vanessa's calm that was truly astonishing. Lena had seen her command a room of powerful men with a single quiet sentence, but she had never seen her subjected to such a petty public humiliation. As Haley delivered her final sneering insult, Lena's fingers moved with practiced speed across her phone's screen. She hit the record button. She captured it all. Haley's smug, dismissive gesture, the cruel chuckles from the guests, and the bride's final, cutting words. The video was short, barely 30 seconds long, but it was damning. It was a perfect encapsulation of ugly prejudice wrapped in a designer wedding gown. Vanessa, however, did not react as Lena expected. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood for a moment, a statue of quiet dignity in the face of a storm of scorn. When Haley ordered her to wait with the staff, Vanessa offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then she turned to the now uncomfortable security guard and said in a voice that was clear and steady, "That won't be necessary." With that, she turned and walked away. She didn't storm off in a huff or shrink away in shame. She simply walked, her back straight, her pace unhurried, back toward the parking lot from which she had come. Her composure was, in its own way, a stunning rebuke. It left a void where the drama was supposed to be. The guests who had been watching exchanged confused glances. Haley's victory felt strangely hollow. She had expected tears, or shouting, or a satisfying scene. Instead, she got nothing. Just a quiet exit that somehow made her feel small. Inside, away from the prying eyes of the guests, Haley quickly forgot the incident. She was surrounded by her bridesmaids, a flock of fawning young women in matching silk dresses. She recounted the story with relish, embellishing the details to cast herself as the heroine protecting her exclusive event from an interloper. "You should have seen her," Haley gloated, fluffing her veil in the mirror. She just stood there, speechless. I really had to put that woman in her place. Her friends giggled, offering praise for her decisiveness. "Good for you, Haley," one of them said. "You can't let just anyone wander into your wedding." They were insulated in their bubble of privilege, completely oblivious to the silent forces they had just set in motion. What none of them knew was that Lena Brooks was already walking briskly toward the edge of the property, her phone in her hand. With a few taps, she attached the video file to a new email. The recipient was the head of the legal department at Cole Health Enterprises. The subject line was simple: Incident at Prescott Wedding. The email was sent, time-stamped, and digitally logged. The video, a perfect piece of evidence, was now securely stored on a corporate server. It was a ticking time bomb, and the timer had just been set at a venue where, unbeknownst to Haley, several of Cole Health's most powerful board members were scheduled to arrive later that very evening. 1 week earlier, the world looked very different from the 50th floor corner office of the Cole Health Enterprises Tower. From here, the city spread out like a circuit board, a complex network of lights and energy that Vanessa Cole oversaw with a calm, strategic mind. She was in her element, surrounded by sleek glass walls and minimalist furniture that spoke of power that didn't need to shout. Evan Prescott, a mid-level executive in her marketing department, stood before her desk, his hands clasped nervously. He was young, ambitious, and had just successfully piloted a difficult campaign for a new line of medical devices. For months he had worked tirelessly, putting in long hours and showing a level of dedication that had caught Vanessa's eye. She believed in rewarding merit, in recognizing the people who formed the backbone of her company. "Dr. Cole," Evan had begun, his voice a little shaky. "I know this is unorthodox, and please feel free to say no, but my fiancée and I would be so honored if you would attend our wedding next Saturday, as my personal guest." He had pushed a thick, embossed invitation across the polished surface of her desk. Vanessa had looked at him, really looked at him, past the nervous suit and tie. She saw the genuine sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't just trying to curry favor. He was proud of his work and genuinely wanted to share this personal milestone. This, to Vanessa, was a sign of good character. Her entire empire was built on identifying and nurturing people like Evan. Her journey from being a teenage janitor, scrubbing floors in a hospital after school, to becoming the billionaire CEO of a national health corporation had taught her one invaluable lesson: the heart of any enterprise is its people. She remembered the doctors who had ignored her, the nurses who had sneered at her, but she also remembered the one senior physician who had learned her name, asked about her studies, and encouraged her to dream bigger. That small act of kindness had fueled her ambition for years. She made a vow then that if she ever found herself in a position of power, she would never forget the people who worked in the trenches. So she had smiled warmly at Evan, a genuine smile that made him relax instantly. "Evan, I would be delighted to attend," she said. "Thank you for the kind invitation." His face had lit up with relief and gratitude. Vanessa made a decision in that moment. She would attend not as a CEO, but as herself. There would be no entourage of assistants, no imposing security detail, no grand arrival in a chauffeured town car. She wanted to see her employees in their own lives, to understand them as people, not just as names on a spreadsheet. It was how she stayed connected, how she kept her own humanity intact in the rarefied air of corporate power. It was this same humility that had prompted her to select a modest, elegant dress and to drive herself to the country club. She had even stopped on the way to pick up a small, thoughtful wedding gift, a set of antique medical prints she thought Evan, who was passionate about the history of medicine, would appreciate. She had carried it with her to the entrance, a simple gesture of goodwill. Now, that same humility, that same desire to connect on a human level, had brought her face to face with the raw, ugly prejudice of a woman who saw a simple black dress and a black face and saw nothing else. The irony was bitter. The very quality that had enabled her to build an empire was the one that Haley Prescott had used as a weapon to humiliate her. Meanwhile, inside the groom's suite, a different kind of storm was brewing. Evan Prescott was pacing the plush carpet, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. The wedding was perfect, just as Haley had planned. The flowers were exquisite, the music was tasteful, and the guests were all smiling. But something was wrong. Dr. Cole hadn't arrived. He had been scanning the crowd for her since the first guests began to trickle in, hoping to catch her eye and thank her personally for coming. Her acceptance of his invitation had been a massive coup, a validation of his hard work that he had secretly cherished for a week. He hadn't told Haley the full truth about who she was. He had simply said that he had invited his boss, a vague description that Haley had interpreted to mean some boring, middle-aged department head. He knew his fiancée could be particular. He knew she judged people harshly based on appearances and status. He had worried that if she knew a billionaire CEO was attending, she would either become sycophantically starstruck or, worse, find some reason to be critical. He had decided it was easier to let Dr. Cole just blend in. He had fatally underestimated both Haley's snobbery and her willingness to create a scene. A colleague from his department, a man named Mark, clapped him on the shoulder, pulling him out of his worried thoughts. "Everything all right, Evan?" Mark asked, holding a glass of champagne. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad, not get married." Evan forced a weak smile. "Just pre-wedding jitters, I guess." Mark leaned in conspiratorially. "Well, this should calm your nerves. A little office gossip for you. Wasn't the big boss, Dr. Cole, supposed to be here? I thought I saw her name on the seating chart draft." Evan's heart skipped a beat. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle his skin. "She is," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I haven't seen her yet. Maybe she's running late." He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Vanessa's contact number. He tried to call her, but the call went straight to voicemail. A sense of dread began to creep over him. He tried sending a quick text. "Dr. Cole, are you here? Hope everything is okay." No reply. Just then, Haley swept into the room, her bridesmaids trailing behind her. She looked radiant, but her eyes held a familiar, self-satisfied gleam that always made Evan nervous. "Evan, darling, stop worrying. Everything is perfect," she said, adjusting his tie. She then turned to her friends, a dismissive wave in her hand. "You will not believe what I had to deal with at the door. Some woman in a dreadful black dress tried to crash the wedding." Evan's blood ran cold. He felt the color drain from his face. "What woman?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Haley shrugged, examining her reflection in a nearby mirror. "Oh, just some nobody. She claimed you invited her. Can you imagine? I sent her packing, of course." She laughed, a light, carefree sound. "Probably realized she didn't belong and scurried off." The words hit Evan like a physical blow. "A dreadful black dress. Claimed you invited her." It couldn't be. It was a coincidence. But deep down, in the pit of his stomach, he knew. He knew exactly who Haley was talking about. His mouth went dry. The perfect sunlit room suddenly felt like a cage. He had a vision of Dr. Vanessa Cole, the humble, powerful woman who held his entire career in her hands, being turned away at the door like a beggar. He looked at his beautiful, smiling bride, and for the first time he saw a stranger. He saw the architect of a disaster so profound, so complete, that he couldn't yet begin to comprehend its full scope. In the quiet solitude of the country club's vast parking lot, Lena Brooks finally caught up with Vanessa, who was standing calmly by her car. Lena's face was flushed with anger, her voice shaking with a righteous fury that she couldn't contain. "You can't be serious," she said, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You're just going to let her get away with that? That woman just publicly humiliated you. She insulted you. We have it on video, Vanessa. We should release it. We should call the club manager, her father, everyone. She needs to understand what she did." Lena was breathing heavily, her loyalty and protective instincts firing on all cylinders. She had seen Vanessa navigate treacherous corporate waters with unparalleled grace, and to see her subjected to such a cheap, classless insult was more than she could bear. She wanted justice, swift and public. Vanessa turned to face her friend, her expression serene. There was no anger in her eyes, only a deep, weary understanding of the world. She placed a gentle hand on Lena's arm. "Lena, breathe," she said, her voice calm and measured. "Outrage is a fire that consumes the person who holds it. It's not our weapon." Lena was momentarily stunned into silence by her boss's composure. "But she disrespected you," Lena stammered. Vanessa nodded slowly. "Yes, she did. And the world always exposes itself, Lena. We don't need to rush it. People like Haley Prescott, their arrogance is a sickness. Eventually, the symptoms always become public." She spoke with the certainty of a woman who had seen this exact scenario play out 100 times in 100 different ways. She had learned long ago that the most powerful response to prejudice was not a loud confrontation, but the quiet, inevitable march of consequences. But Lena was not entirely convinced. The injustice felt too raw, too immediate to simply be left to fate. "So what?" she asked, a note of desperation in her voice. "We just drive away? We let her have her perfect little wedding after she treated you like dirt?" Vanessa's lips curved into a subtle, knowing smile. It was a smile that Lena had seen before, right before a major acquisition or a brilliant strategic move that left competitors reeling. It was a smile that signaled that the game was far from over. It had merely shifted to a different board. Vanessa pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with a quiet purpose across the screen. She opened a secure messaging app and composed a short, simple message. It was addressed to the members of her executive board. It read, "Change of plans for tonight. The post-merger dinner is being moved. New venue, Oak Haven Country Club Ballroom, 7 p.m. sharp. I will explain upon arrival." She hit send. Lena watched, her brow furrowed in confusion. Then her eyes widened as the full implication of the message dawned on her. The post-merger dinner was a major event, a celebration of the acquisition of a new subsidiary, the very deal that Evan Prescott had worked so hard on. The entire executive board, along with key investors and stakeholders, were scheduled to attend. By moving the dinner to the wedding venue, Vanessa wasn't just changing a location. She was setting a stage. She was turning a personal humiliation into a corporate revelation. She was about to confront Haley Prescott not as a wronged individual, but as the silent, unassailable power that controlled her husband's world. Lena looked at her boss, no longer seeing just a victim of prejudice, but a master strategist at work. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured golf course, Haley Prescott was in her element. She drifted through the reception hall, a glass of champagne in her hand, basking in the adoration of her guests. The ceremony had been flawless, the vows exchanged, and now she was officially Mrs. Evan Prescott. But the triumph she felt had less to do with the man beside her, and more to do with the event she had orchestrated. She held court near the towering wedding cake, recounting the story of the gatecrasher for a new, appreciative audience. With each telling, the story grew more dramatic and her own role more heroic. "She was dressed like the cleaning lady," Haley said, laughing as her friends tittered in response. "Can you believe the nerve? Some people have no class, no sense of boundaries." She reveled in the shared sense of superiority, the collective nod that affirmed their exclusive world and her rightful place as its gatekeeper. Some of the guests, however, listened with a growing sense of unease. A few of the older, more established attendees, particularly those with connections to the corporate world, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The name, Vanessa Cole, which Haley had spat out with such disdain, rang a faint bell. They couldn't quite place it, but it was associated with power, with a quiet but immense influence in the health and tech sectors. They exchanged subtle, questioning glances over the rims of their champagne flutes. They were starting to feel that Haley's little drama might have been a serious miscalculation. Meanwhile, Evan's anxiety had solidified into a cold, hard knot of dread in his gut. He had been trying to act the part of the happy groom, smiling for photos, shaking hands, and accepting congratulations. But his mind was elsewhere. He kept checking his phone, his heart lurching with every notification, hoping for a message from Dr. Cole that would tell him this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But his phone remained silent, at least from her. Then, a different kind of message came through. It wasn't a text or a call, but an internal corporate alert from the Cole Health Enterprises server, pushed to the work profile on his phone. These alerts were rare, reserved only for high-priority, company-wide announcements. His blood ran cold as he read the words on the screen. Event update. The CHE post-merger executive dinner has been relocated. CEO Dr. Vanessa Cole has arrived at your current event location, the Oak Haven Country Club, and will be hosting the board in the main ballroom this evening. Evan read the message once, then twice. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. CEO Dr. Vanessa Cole has arrived at your event. The words hammered in his brain. She wasn't just a guest who had been turned away. She was here, now. And she had brought the entire executive board with her. He looked across the room at his wife, who was laughing, blissfully unaware that the sky was about to fall. The disaster he had feared was no longer looming. It had arrived. From the quiet, leather-scented interior of her parked car, Vanessa Cole made a single, quiet phone call. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the parking lot was now bathed in the soft glow of lampposts. Her voice was calm, authoritative, and left no room for questions. "Marcus," she said, speaking to the head of her security and logistics team, "the board is en route. I need you to ensure they are all seated comfortably in the main ballroom upon arrival. Inform the club's general manager that Cole Health Enterprises is taking over the venue for the remainder of the evening. It's a corporate emergency booking. He'll find our corporate account more than covers any inconvenience." She paused, a flicker of steel in her voice. "And Marcus, I want you to find Haley's father. His name is Robert Sterling. Extend our corporate regards and let him know that the CEO of Cole Health would like a word with him about the conduct of his daughter." She ended the call without waiting for a reply. She knew Marcus would execute her orders with flawless precision. Within minutes, the serene atmosphere of the Oak Haven Country Club was shattered. A procession of sleek black town cars began to pull up to the main entrance one after another. The doors opened and men and women in sharp business suits emerged. These were the senior executives and board members of Cole Health Enterprises, some of the most powerful people in the industry. Their faces were a mixture of curiosity and stern professionalism. They had been pulled away from their Saturday evening plans by a cryptic message from their CEO, and they had come expecting answers. Inside the club, the staff began to scramble. The general manager, a man accustomed to dealing with demanding clients, was now faced with a situation far beyond his experience. He had received a call from a man named Marcus, informing him that his venue was being rebooked for the rest of the night by a billionaire CEO, effective immediately. He tried to protest, to explain that a wedding reception was in progress, but the name Cole Health Enterprises and the mention of a contractual override for corporate events silenced him. Word of the unexpected upheaval quickly reached Haley. She was in the middle of directing the photographer for a group shot with her family when the wedding planner, Mr. Turner, approached her, his face pale and beaded with sweat. "Mrs. Prescott," he whispered urgently, "we have a situation. There seems to be another event happening." Haley's smile vanished. "What are you talking about? I booked this entire venue for the night." Mr. Turner wrung his hands. "I know, but the club management has just informed me that the ballroom is being prepared for a private corporate dinner for the CEO of some company." Haley's confusion instantly morphed into pure, undiluted fury. Her perfect day, her flawless event, was being encroached upon by some nameless, faceless corporate drone. "Who?" she demanded, her voice rising to a dangerous pitch. "Who does she think she is, trying to ruin my wedding?" The answer to her question was about to arrive, not in the form of a quiet explanation, but as a public spectacle from which there would be no escape. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the curtain was about to rise on Haley Prescott's spectacular fall from grace. The moment had been planned by Haley as the grand finale of her perfect evening. The DJ was to play their special song, and she and Evan, as the happy newlyweds, would make their grand entrance into the main ballroom for their first dance, kicking off an evening of celebration. As the double doors to the ballroom swung open, however, they stopped dead in their tracks. The scene before them was not what they had expected. The dance floor was gone. The tables set for their wedding guests had been pushed to the sides of the room. Instead, the ballroom was filled with long, formal dining tables, arranged as if for a corporate banquet. Seated at these tables were dozens of men and women in severe, dark business attire. They were all looking toward the front of the room where a podium had been set up. The air was thick with a tense, expectant silence. Reporters and photographers, not the ones Haley had hired, but serious-looking journalists from business publications, lined the walls, their cameras poised. And there, standing confidently at the podium, was Dr. Vanessa Cole. She was no longer the unassuming woman in a simple black dress. She now commanded the room with an aura of quiet, unshakable power. She held a microphone in her hand, her gaze sweeping over the assembled executives. Gasps rippled through the wedding party, who had followed the couple to the doorway. Haley's bridesmaids looked on in stunned confusion. Haley herself turned pale, a sickly white that clashed with her pristine gown. The color drained from her face as her brain struggled to process the impossible sight before her. The woman from the entrance. The cleaning lady she had so smugly dismissed was now standing at the head of a room filled with corporate titans. Evan's heart, which had been hammering against his ribs, seemed to sink into the floor. This was worse than he could have ever imagined. It was a public execution, and he was standing right beside the person who had handed the executioner the axe. Vanessa raised the microphone to her lips, and her calm, clear voice filled the silent hall. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for accommodating this last-minute change of venue." Her eyes found Haley and Evan frozen in the doorway. She held their gaze for a long, heavy moment before continuing. "I was reminded tonight of a valuable lesson. A lesson about appearances, about assumptions, and about the nature of respect." Her voice was not angry. It was far more devastating. It was calm, measured, and carried the weight of absolute authority. "Tonight, I was reminded that respect is not a commodity that can be bought with a fancy dress or an expensive venue, but it is something that can be lost in an instant with a single careless act of cruelty." Cameras flashed, the bright bursts of light illuminating the shock on Haley's face. She finally understood. The strange, familiar name, the corporate alert on Evan's phone, the sudden arrival of all these serious people. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening finality. The stranger she had kicked out, the woman she had mocked and humiliated, was not a stranger at all. She was someone who mattered, someone who held power. The woman owned the company that employed her husband. And, as she was quickly learning, she also held the power to command the very building she was standing in, turning Haley's personal triumph into a stage for her own public reckoning. The tension in the ballroom was so thick it was almost suffocating. Every eye was on Vanessa at the podium, and on Haley and Evan, who remained frozen in the doorway like statues in a tragic play. The silence stretched on, broken only by the soft click of camera shutters. Haley's mind was racing, desperately trying to find a way out, an explanation, a defense. But there was none. The sheer, bald-faced arrogance of her earlier actions left her with nothing to say. Her world, so carefully constructed on a foundation of status and exclusion, was crumbling around her. Vanessa let the silence hang in the air for another moment, allowing the full weight of the situation to settle on everyone present. Then she spoke again, her voice as clear and sharp as a scalpel. "For those of you who may be confused," she began, her gaze sweeping across the room before landing squarely on Haley, "allow me to introduce myself formally." She paused, letting the anticipation build. "My name is Dr. Vanessa Cole. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Cole Health Enterprises." A collective gasp went through the wedding guests, who were huddled at the back of the room. The name, spoken with such authority, now connected all the dots. Cole Health, the multi-billion-dollar corporation, the industry giant, Evan's employer. Haley's jaw went slack. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked at Evan, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and accusation. He could only stare back, his face a mask of pale, helpless horror. You're his boss?" Haley finally managed to stutter, the words barely audible. Her voice was a pathetic squeak, a ghost of the commanding tone she had used just a few hours before. Vanessa gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I am," she confirmed. The simple affirmation was devastating. "I was personally invited to this wedding by Mr. Prescott as a gesture of appreciation for his hard work on a recent project. I came as a guest, hoping to celebrate a happy occasion with a valued member of my team." Her eyes, calm and steady, bored into Haley. "But I was not treated as a guest. I was not even treated as a stranger. I was treated as less than human." Her voice never rose, but the power of her words echoed through the hall. She turned her attention from Haley to the wider audience, to her board members, to the reporters, to everyone who was now a witness. At Cole Health Enterprises, we have a code of conduct. It is built on a foundation of integrity, professionalism, and above all, respect. Disrespect to any individual, regardless of their position or appearance, is not tolerated. She then looked directly at the grim-faced board members seated in the front row. Disrespect has consequences. The board members nodded in unison, their faces like stone. They understood the message perfectly. This was no longer about a personal insult. This was a corporate matter, a public demonstration of the company's core values. Haley's parents, who had rushed forward to see what the commotion was, sank back into their seats, their faces ashen. The perfect wedding they had paid for had just become the sight of their daughters and their family's public disgrace. The jaws of the other wedding guests had literally dropped. They were witnessing a social collapse in real time, a brutal and efficient dismantling of a person's arrogance, and it was a spectacle no one would ever forget. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The story was simply too perfect to be contained. Before the night was even over, the video that Lena had so discreetly recorded was leaked to the press. It wasn't an anonymous leak. It was released through Cole Health's official PR channels with Vanessa's direct approval. The 30-second clip was devastating. It showed Haley in her beautiful white gown, her face twisted in a sneer, delivering her cruel lines with theatrical disdain. Juxtaposed with images of the powerful, composed Dr. Vanessa Cole at the podium, it created a narrative of poetic justice that the internet consumed with ravenous glee. By the next morning, the Boss Bride story was the #1 trending topic worldwide. News outlets, gossip blogs, and social media influencers all picked up the story, replaying the video and dissecting every second of Haley's public humiliation. The consequences for Haley and her family were swift and brutal. The illusion of their high social standing was shattered overnight. Sponsors who had deals with Haley's father's real estate firm began to pull out, issuing public statements about their commitment to diversity and respect. They wanted no association with the viral face of entitlement. The country club issued a formal apology to Dr. Cole, and Haley's family was quietly informed that their membership was under review. For Evan, the professional repercussions were just as severe. He was called into an emergency meeting with Human Resources the very next day. His corporate accounts were frozen, and he was placed on immediate indefinite leave pending a full review for undisclosed guest misconduct and failure to uphold company values at a corporate-sponsored event location. The career he had worked so hard to build was now in ruins. Haley, in a desperate attempt at damage control, tried to issue a public apology. She claimed the entire incident was a terrible misunderstanding, that she had been under a lot of stress, and that she hadn't recognized Dr. Cole. But no one believed her. The video was too clear, her words too cutting. Her apology came across as a pathetic, self-serving attempt to save her own reputation, and it only fueled the public's contempt. The next day, Vanessa held a press conference. She didn't mention Haley by name. She didn't need to. She stood before a sea of cameras and microphones, the picture of grace and strength. "This was never about one person or one incident," she said, her voice steady and strong. "It is about a simple, fundamental principle. The way we treat each other matters. Kindness is not a weakness, and arrogance is not a strength. No one, not a bride, not a CEO, not even a billionaire, is above the basic requirement of human respect." The room erupted in applause. Vanessa had not only won the moral victory, she had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into a global lesson on dignity. In the weeks that followed, as the storm of public opinion continued to rage, Vanessa made a quiet but significant change within her own company. At a formal board meeting, she called Lena Brooks to the front of the room. The executives, who now knew the full story of Lena's role in documenting the incident, watched with interest. "An empire is not built on money or power alone," Vanessa announced to the board, her voice resonating with conviction. "It is built on the character of its people. It is built on loyalty, on integrity, and on the courage to do the right thing, even when it's difficult." She then turned to Lena, a warm smile on her face. "For her quick thinking, her unwavering loyalty, and her profound integrity, I am promoting Lena Brooks to the position of Director of Public Relations for Cole Health Enterprises." A wave of applause filled the boardroom. Lena, stunned and overwhelmed, could only manage a grateful nod. It was a clear message to everyone in the company. Loyalty and character were the most valuable assets a person could possess, and they would be rewarded above all else. The clip of Vanessa's calm, composed words from the press conference began to circulate everywhere, becoming a viral sound on social media platforms, used in videos about workplace dignity and standing up to bullies. Hat the Boss Bride story was no longer just a story about a wedding gone wrong. It had become a cultural touchstone, a modern fable about the triumph of grace over arrogance. Dr. Vanessa Cole, the quiet, unassuming billionaire, was no longer an anonymous figure in the corporate world. She had become an international symbol of class, poise, and the quiet, unyielding strength that comes from knowing your own worth, regardless of how others see you. She had shown the world that you didn't need to raise your voice to be heard, and that sometimes the most powerful statement is made in the calm after the storm. Weeks turned into months. The viral storm eventually subsided, as all storms do, but the landscape it left behind was permanently altered. For Haley and Evan, the marriage that had begun with such a spectacular implosion never recovered. The weight of the public shame, combined with the financial and professional ruin, was too much to bear. Their union, built on a shallow foundation of ambition and status, crumbled under the first real pressure it faced. They separated quietly, their perfect wedding now nothing more than a painful, humiliating memory. One sunny afternoon, Vanessa Cole drove her modest sedan not to her gleaming corporate tower, but to a small, unassuming building in a forgotten part of the city. It was the community youth center where, as a teenager, she had spent countless hours mopping floors and cleaning windows, dreaming of a different life. A few reporters, having been tipped off about her visit, were waiting for her. They swarmed her as she got out of the car, microphones extended. "Dr. Cole," one of them shouted, "how does it feel to win, to get that kind of public vindication?" Vanessa paused, a gentle, thoughtful smile on her face. She looked at the community center, at the faded paint and the basketball hoop with the tattered net, and remembered the young girl she used to be. "It's never about winning," she said softly, her voice carrying a profound sense of peace. "It's not about victory or revenge. It's about reminding people and reminding ourselves that character still matters, that how we treat the person we think is beneath us is the truest measure of who we are." She then walked past the reporters and into the center, where a new generation of kids were dreaming their own dreams. The story of Haley and Evan, of the disastrous wedding and the public fallout, had already faded into the background of her life. It was a minor chapter in a much larger story. As she drove away later that day, the late afternoon sunlight warming her face, the lessons of that day remained. They echoed in the quiet hum of her car's engine, a simple, powerful truth for the world to remember. Never disrespect someone based on what you think they are, because the janitor, the waitress, or the quiet woman you mock might just be your boss. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.